The moving miniature bonsai tree Pokemon was first discovered by a trainer in Pyrite Town but was later cataloged in Sin as part of the National Dex. I was very excited to have a Pokemon tied to their region, but no researcher wanted to brave the desert to confirm that they were a natural species, so it was never to be. It is unknown why there are not more Bonsly within a. It is the ideal environment for their type, but their method of disguise is completely counterproductive to this. There are no plants in the wasteland, that is a. One possible explanation is that despite the ever-looming fear of being watered in greener environments, Bonsly still require a degree of moisture to enable them to cry. Within the sands of a, there is not enough moisture for Bonsly to effectively cry, which would explain why they are not an abundant species there. Bonsly is the pre-evolution of Sudowoodo, the imitation Pokemon. Sudowoodo's own discovery was mired by the fiasco surrounding its typing. It appears to be a tree, yet it's actually a rock type. This comes from its nature as the imitation Pokemon. It survives in the wild by disguising itself as a grass-type Pokemon to avoid its natural enemies, water-type Pokemon. Now while Bonsly too appears to share the appearance of a grass-type Pokemon, it does not act like one. Sudowoodo takes its role as a tree very seriously, where Bonsly does not. Bonsly are rarely seen around any real shrubbery, preferring its more natural habitat of caves, deserts, or other mountainous regions. It is a rock-type Pokemon at heart, and it acts like one. This of course leads to more frequent encounters with water-type Pokemon which are eager to grow stronger in the wild. They seek out these weak rock types in order to grow. Because of this way of life, Bonsly will quickly begin learning to act more and more like grass types, and then when it has mastered the move Mimic will evolve into Sudowoodo. It will then leave its natural habitat and make its home in the nearest forest. Sudowoodo, it's a rock that looks like a tree to disguise itself from potential predators. In all, a clever, but boring, Pokemon. However, a much more interesting query is how its baby, Bonsly, came about. They only hatch when their parents are bred in captivity. Obviously, wild Sudowoodo do not run around holding man-made rock incenses, but it seems as though their proximity to mankind has affected their natural instinct for camouflage. While Sudowoodo get along just fine in nature as a tree, Bonsly bears an evolutionarily unfortunate resemblance to a potted plant, which is only a useful disguise in suburbia, where it remains until adulthood. How the incense carries the genetic information needed to change Sudowoodo's shape, and why it reverts upon learning the move Mimic, are not known. What is known is that, though Bonsly are cute, people using them as house pets have contributed to quite the invasive species problem. Far too many evolved Bonsly turned loose refuse to leave their hometowns, instead choosing to simply stand in the middle of the road and block traffic for weeks on end. Bonsly is one of the most unlikely Pokemon around, as its camouflage seemingly has no positive effect in its natural environment. Bonsly appears to take on the appearance of a potted angiosperm, a flowering plant, yet it is quite clear that potted plants simply do not exist naturally in the wild. This has led scientists to theorize that recently hatched wild Bonsly actually live in caves underground, rather than sticking out like a sore thumb in the wild. The Bonsly that we see in the wild are actually mature Bonsly that are ready to evolve into the much more powerful Sudowoodo. These Bonsly are powerful enough to deal with most of the threats of their natural environment, so they have clambered from their underground haven in order to seek experience in battle. Through this battling, they can go on to learn the move Mimic, which is necessary for the evolution process. Not much is known about this, but it can be assumed that it has something to do with improving the camouflage of the young Bonsly and thus giving it the means to evolve.